Welcome back to the desert. Well, we're still here in my art studio. That's our art studio. With our desert well. We're doing an article today that talks about the feeling Derek feels all the time, which is
always angry.
You'll hear why he doesn't think or feel that a lot in the conversation. But a very interesting thing. What was your favorite part about it?
Just the imagery and the things that I have not thought about before. So there's a couple things about like the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve, sin, how to view sin, things like that that were good.
So these articles, 5 of them, come from David Maxwell at the seminary in St. Louis. The link to a Google Drive that has all of them in one place, and then links to the articles themselves, so you can go and check them, is in the description below. But hope this is a good one. Hey, what should you do with all those things you feel? Thanks for being here as we gather around the well that is Jesus. It's a good one today. Enjoy.
All right. I've not read this.
You've not read this.
I have not.
That means it'll be good.
It's like the reaction videos.
Sure.
Or the unboxing videos.
Yeah, there you go. I like to watch those. So, good. Well, then I've read it. And I think this is one of those... oh man, this is great. I promise I don't ever ask you these questions to, like, get you or to make you feel...
I'm hiding.
Like, I really hope you don't think this. Like, I'm not asking you these to test how smart Derek is. Like, I know you're a smart guy. You've got
Sometimes.
No, you are. And so, because you haven't read this yet, let me ask you what you think people think and then what you think. So, He's going to talk about anger and passion are the 2 things he's going to talk about, or he uses the language of desire. So, and he's going to contrast 2 very different ways of thinking about this. So if you had to guess, what do you think most people think when they think about, okay, because I'm a follower of Jesus, here's what I need to do or think about my anger and my desire. And like desire, he doesn't like just go so far. It's not like just like love or like lust desire, but just broadly speaking desire, like the feeling of wanting. So where do you think most people normally are? And then what do you think, where are you at? What do you do with those things?
I would say most people would probably just jump to the like very negative parts of anger and desire and say that we shouldn't do those things.
Mm-hmm. So like we need to rid ourselves of them.
Yeah, or like try to avoid it or not put ourselves in those situations. Put it that way.
And what does Derek do?
Well, I told you earlier when you handed me this. It's like, I don't know what to say. I don't get angry that often. Becca might disagree, but...
Are you a quiet angry person?
Yeah, probably. I'm more quiet just in general anyways.
Right.
I don't know. I try not to get angry just in general about anything. I mean, of course I do every once in a while, but very few times do I actually get angry.
Sure.
So I don't know if that's an avoidance thing or if it's just...
like some superhuman power you have?
Yeah, it's...
Maybe when Malachi gets older, we can have this conversation again, and you can tell me how you feel about anger.
I don't know, even with him, like, there'll be times where like he does something, right, and he's only 16 months old, but he does something, and I guess there was one time in church I walked out of the sanctuary with him because he was hitting us and wouldn't stop. But I wouldn't say I was, like, angry even in that moment.
Yeah.
It's just like, no, I need to remove himself from what he's doing.
What's more, and maybe this is where you get into, like, nuances of emotion, but even when, like, the kids are very disobedient or, like, you know, I feel like slamming my head into a wall. I don't know if anger is necessarily the right word, except extreme frustration. Like come on, like I know you can do this. I know you can do better. Like maybe it's just me not wanting to say I get angry. But anyway, so let's go ahead and dive in, because I think he's going to do a good job of suggesting different things. So you see this, but there are 5 articles here, and I think they're short enough where we should be able to read through them all, I think. And it's a series, right? So we kind of have to go through all of them to kind of get to the end point of what on earth to do with it. And so let's do what we've done in the past, where we read a little bit, and then because you're reading it for the first time, you can just kind of stop us whenever you think hear something that's perks your interest. So I'll go ahead.
No
and start.
highlights.
Yeah, no highlights. Well, and I just underline here. And to be honest, there's not. It wasn't like I read through it and there were so many things I was underlining. I was like, wow, this is nuts. It's more of just, I think this is a very helpful way to have a conversation about these things.
I see some Greek in here. Are you going to read the Greek words?
Yeah, I'll read the Greek words for us.
You can read those?
Yeah, this is like, it's like the Greek. Thumos, epithumia, hedon, phobos, lupe. Huh? That's Greek. I might be 6 years out, but I haven't forgotten how to read Greek.
Nice.
Now, don't ask me to parse it. That is a nominative, singular. They're not verbs, so that wouldn't necessarily be the right way to even do that. So, but anyway, I've forgotten a lot of that, which is probably unhelpful. But when my Bible software, I can hover over the word, and it will automatically parse it for me.
Tells you what it is.
Yeah, right. It tells me all that jazz. And then my seminary professor, Dr. Jeffrey Gibbs, who, here we go, he's a connection. He wrote 2 articles that are great. If you've never read them, you should read them, on the myth of righteous anger. The myth of righteous anger, because in some circles, people think well, I can be angry as long as I'm angry at sin. And so we kind of call it righteous anger. Most people usually point to Jesus in the temple. And so if Jesus did it, I can do it too. And he kind of makes the case that basically, no, Jesus is God. And Jesus can be angry and not sin. But
so I can't go flip tables?
You're not. Right. So that's a great article. Here's a couple of them. Very, very mixed, very interesting points. And I use that in the real sense of the word, not my usual sense of the word. It's very intriguing how he talks about it. So I'll read the first one. And then we'll just kind of go through and interrupt me as you can read the second one, I'll read the third one, all those sort of things. So the first of these, all this is written by David Maxwell, professor at Concordia Seminary, St. Louis, that I had the privilege, you can say it that way, the honor, to be in this class too. So I know, which is kind of cool. So the first one is, what should you do with anger and desire? You have 2 jet engines in your soul, anger and desire. What are you supposed to do with them? Should you try to shut off the engines, or should you try to aim them in a constructive direction? This is a question that Western civilization has been grappling with for centuries, and Christianity is a part of that conversation.
Can I pause?
Yeah, sure.
So am I just not going anywhere? Do I not have any?
I would say, Derek, you feel these things, whether you know them or not. Right, all people have feelings and emotions. Of course. Right. So he keeps going. Well, it may be helpful too that he is David Maxwell is a early church fathers guy, so he knows a lot about the early church fathers. And if you've never heard that phrase before, it's the people who were alive after Jesus ascended, right? Mm-hmm. And we're writing in the year 200, 300, something like that. So we have a lot of their documents. So he knows a lot about those people. He's going to reference them. Let's keep going. He writes, the image of the 2 jet engines comes from Plato's Republic, where he compares the soul to a chariot with 2 horses, parentheses. Okay, they're not actually jet engines, end parentheses. Thumos, which means spiritedness or anger, and epithumia, yeah, that's how I'll say that, desire. So 2 words, thumos or epithumia, yeah, we'll say it that way, desire. These horses are controlled by the charioteer, which is reason. Ideally, both horses are under the control of reason so that the chariot goes in the right direction. And this is a great, I've heard this idea before in one of my things on my wall, the How to Make a Switch. I forget what the book was called, but it's their first step is to direct the rider. And then that's basically saying, hey, you have to tell the rider how to control the emotions. That if we let only emotions drive us, then we'll kind of
Sure.
go all over the place, right? Paul says we're driven by the wind. But if we don't ever consider our emotions, then we're not going to look at things holistically as a person. So anyway, the phrase there, direct the rider, came to mind as I read that. Mm-hmm. But let's keep going. This is a very different ideal than that of the Stoics, who sees the passions as diseases which need to be eliminated. So we have the Plato Republic and then the Stoics. The Stoics identify four main passions. Lupe, which is distress. Phobos, which fear, which should sound like a pretty similar word, right? Any guesses what the word that we have? So if you're really, really afraid of something,
phobia.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right, and that comes from the Greek word phobos. Mm-hmm. So there you go. Hedone, pleasure, which also sounds like a word, right? Hedone. If you're really into certain things, you would call it hedonism.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Hedone. Very cool. Sorry. These sort of word things are fun for me. Mostly because I actually realize them, where most of the times I'm completely ignorant.
And we would do this with science and things, right? Latin.
Yep. Yeah. Same deal.
Yep.
And then epithemia, desire. So distress, fear, pleasure, and desire. Distress is the experience of a present evil, where fear is the anticipation of a future evil. Similarly, pleasure is the experience of a present good, while desire is the anticipation of a future good. The reason these passions are problematic for the Stoics is that the only thing that is truly good, according to the Stoics, is virtue, and the only thing that is truly evil is vice. So if you judge anything else to be good or evil, you are in error. I love he's about to give an example because I read that and was like, what?
Correct.
For example, if you hit your thumb with a hammer, the feeling of the physical impact is neutral. But as soon as you make the judgment that this is bad for you, it becomes the passion of lupe, or distress or pain. The goal of a Stoic spiritually, then, is to stop making these wrong judgments, and in this way, to get rid of passions.
Kind of like that analogy.
Yeah. So, which is the better path? If we turn to the early church, again, he's the early church guy, we find that the church fathers came down squarely on both sides of the question. And I don't just mean that some church fathers are Platonist in their spirituality, while others are Stoic, but you can often find both tendencies in the same fathers. In this series of blog posts, I'm going to explore these two spiritualities in the early church and in Lutheran theology. I'm going to focus on anger and desire as the two main passions, since that pair was adopted by a number of church fathers as the best way to categorize passions. But before delving into this question, you might consider which path you think is better. Should we Christians attempt to empty ourselves of anger and desire as much as possible? Or should we harness our anger and desire to steer them in the right direction? What do you think? I sort of already asked you, I guess, didn't I?
I mean, based on my initial answer, right? I would say that most people would try to steer clear of them because of the connotations behind them or what we think of them, right? I don't know that I ever answered the second part to your question, though, so maybe I'll answer it here. Like, how do I see them? Mm-hmm. I mean, I would see it more probably along the lines of like what he was saying with the early church fathers. Now I'm not putting myself in their realm of any of that, right? But that I can see more of both sides. Mm-hmm. But again, that I think goes more to how I try to look at things anyways, is
sure.
Trying to be in the middle for...
Nothing's ever black and white. Put my water down somewhere.
Correct. So should we harness anger and desire? I think there are times where absolutely you should. As long as it's in the right direction, right? But I don't think that should be your go-to every single time.
Sure.
And likewise, I don't think that we should just try to get rid of our anger and desire as much as possible either.
Right. If you take out emotions, are you even a human? And that's like an interesting AI conversation, I feel like. And even just in general, what makes a human being? emotions are one aspect of them.
Mm-hmm.
He's about to say some very intriguing things. But the thing I would say here is, this is the part where I would always say, underneath every single feeling, especially anger, is something else, right? That most of the times, very few people are actually simply and only angry.
Right.
Right. There's always a deeper reality. Right?
Yeah. They had been hurt at some point in time, right? Yeah. That's
previous experiences, all those sort of things. So let's keep going.
All right.
I don't know. Is there any Greek words in this one?
There is.
There's a couple. So I'll just blurt them out blatantly, loudly,
I will pause
interruptedly.
because I will look at this and be like, yeah, I have no idea what that is. Although, well, there's some.
He doesn't give. Yeah, he's not giving you like the English transliteration of them either.
No.
Which is somewhat not helpful. But it is a I guess it is a
Scholarly.
seminary. It was from concordiatheology.org. .org. Yes. So I guess it is a scholarly blog.
I have not taken.
It's a great place. Great place for articles, things like that. So, go
All
ahead.
right. 2. Gregory of
Nyssa.
Direct the Passions. Gregory of Nyssa's On the Soul and the Resurrection is a treatise that demonstrates what a Platonic spirituality of the passions looks like when Christians adopt it. The dialogue is a conversation between Gregory and his sister Macrina.
So,
Yes.
the Macarena. That's what I thought when I read that.
And his sister Macrina, we'll call her Macrina, who is attempting to comfort Gregory in the face of the death of their brother Basil. I'm assuming that's how it's pronounced because it's how...
Yeah. I mean, some people would say Basil,
Sure.
but it doesn't really matter.
Okay, we'll go with Basil. And Macrina's own impending death. She does this by instructing him about the nature of the soul and the resurrection. They both agree that they want to deprive their understanding of the soul from the scriptures, not from Greek philosophy. At one point, Macrina even says, "We shall abandon the Platonic chariot and the pair of horses yoked to it." The two horses are anger and desire. Ultimately, however, Gregory finds anger and desire to be a helpful way of categorizing the scriptural teaching about the passions. He says, the soul obviously has a great impulse of desire and another great impulse of anger. And he goes on to say that all other passions are derived from the combination of these two. It's an interesting take.
Right. So that's what I underlined. Was like, all other passions are derived from some combination of anger and desire.
You're thinking about it's probably...
Right, cycling through in your mind, like one of those business rollator card things.
Although, yeah, I don't know. The anger side is still challenging for me to understand, but that's okay. I can definitely see the passions, right, derived from...
Sure.
I suppose you could look at it from like a standpoint of... And I don't know, I see it more as like a motivational thing, but if you're angry that you didn't get something, at some point you didn't win an award, you didn't get a job, you didn't fill in the blank, right? What does that make you do the next time? Well, it drives you,
right,
causes a passion or a desire to get that, obtain that thing. So what do? You work harder, you try to get what you need to do to earn that or be awarded that or whatever.
Or you think about someone like who... so in college I went to the Passion Conference when they did their big End It movement. I don't know if you remember that, 10 years ago now. So it was like a big human trafficking, try and raise awareness, et cetera, et cetera. And you could say people could see the ways in which people are treated, right, forced to do horrific things around the world, and it could make them angry. Right, and then they become passionate about that cause.
Right.
And so it starts from a place of anger that no one should be treated this way, and so then I'm going to do something about it. But yeah, I'm also like a big... I shouldn't say it that way. There have been multiple times in my life where I've done things not simply because someone told me I couldn't do them, but that just really motivated me all the more. Like I think I've told this story. I don't know if it's here or not. And there's differing opinions on the validity of this story. But the way I always tell it is that when I told my parents I was going to run the Chicago Marathon, I never ran more than a little bit cross country before my life. And so that Christmas, they gave me, it was Christmas or my birthday, I think it was Christmas, they gave me some voucher that said, if you finish it, we'll repay your entry fee. But only if I finish it. If I don't, it's so of course, being the cynic, I said, oh, well, that just means you don't think I can do it. And so, no, I'm definitely going to do it. But they disagree that that's how it happened. So I have to say that. But just, it's the same reason when I started running cross country too. It's you've never ran ever in your life. What are you doing? You don't do that. And there's great, at least for me, maybe it's anger. I don't know. You don't believe in me, and that actually makes me angry to the point of motivation. Sure. I don't know, but that I can totally see how this would come from something like that.
All right, let's keep going.
Do it.
If you look through the sins mentioned in the New Testament, it looks like Gregory might be right about this. For example, we have the following list in Ephesians 4:31. Let all bitterness and wrath and anger...
Thumos.
Sorry?
Yep,
wrath.
you're good. Thumos. Yep.
And anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. You might classify these as anger sins. It even includes
Thumos,
the name for one of the Platonic horses. Then a few verses later, we get this list in Ephesians 5, verse 3. But sexual immorality and all impurity or covetousness must not even be named among you, as is proper among the saints. You might classify these as desire sins. Now, I don't think this anger/desire classification accounts for all sins in the New Testament. Unbelief, for example, doesn't seem to fit, but it does account for a lot of them. So where do these passions come from? According to Gregory, Adam and Eve were not created with passions, but they entered through the fall. So you might think that Gregory wants the Christian to eliminate the passions as much as possible. However, that is not the view he takes. He maintains that one can deploy the passions either for good or for evil, just as the same steel can be forged either into a sword or a plowshare.
Have you ever heard that before? This part about Adam and Eve?
No, but reading it, it makes sense. But at the same time, they weren't created without emotions, you wouldn't think.
But that's what I kind of hear him saying.
Right.
They were created without... Because at least in my life, I feel passions are emotions, or maybe we shouldn't interchangeably use those words, but I feel like most people do. Passions are just strong emotions.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it was very curious. Adam and Eve were created without passions. And so what does that mean? I think we have this idea of Adam and Eve in the garden, just kind of obeying, living in perfect love with God, perfect harmony. And I think most of us think about that as passions best. Does that make sense? An ideal world, a perfect love. But I don't think many of us think about the Garden of Eden as an emotionally void space.
Yeah, so that...
right, so it sounds weird.
Yeah, it's somewhat... Well, we don't know what that's like, so it's hard for us to wrap our minds around. But at the same time, it's well, I guess in my mind, I've always thought of them as having passions, desires, emotions, etc.
Sure.
But that's probably why they chose to do what they did.
Right.
Because those things were already in place.
Sure.
At least that's how I would think about it. But
yeah, there's a lot of I think we could go into very strange if-then sort of things here. Does that mean this? Does that mean that? What does this mean about God? Right? If Adam and Eve were made in the image of God and God had no passions, right? So is love just a perfect... It's so full love, he doesn't need it to be passion, right? It just is. But then Jesus becomes a human, and so he somehow perfectly takes on passion, in his. I mean, it's super. Like
Yeah,
there is a lot
you
of.
could go down a lot of.
There's like we don't have time for this. Let's keep going.
All right, the scripture text that he uses as a pattern for the Christian life when it comes to passions is the parable of the wheat and the tares from Matthew chapter 13. Jesus says that we should not root out the tares because in the process we might uproot the wheat as well. Similarly, in Gregory's view, if you try to eliminate the passions, you will also destroy the possibility of using those passions for good. If love is taken away, says Macrina, in what manner will we be joined with the divine? If anger is quenched, what weapon will we have against our adversary? Gregory then proposes a version of Christian spirituality,
Spirituality.
Spirituality.
I got you.
Thank you. That recognizes that it would be dangerous to try to eliminate anger and desire and the other passions, even though they are sinful and are a result of the fall. Instead, he thinks that the Christian should try to direct the passions in a godly and constructive direction. As we shall see in the next post, not all church fathers share this view.
Do you think most people think about it in that way?
I'd say probably not. Most people probably don't think about those things maybe to that depth. I don't know. Could be wrong.
If I just get rid of all of my passions or all of my feelings, then I have nothing left. No? Maybe this is just so interesting to me because it's all like a hypothetical thinking, if you will. But to me, it's rooted in like so much reality because you think about, I mean, we'll sort of get there. It's the next one. But for people who are wrapped up in grief and loss and sorrow and addiction and all of the what we would call more negative experienced passions, like, yeah, they want to root it all up and throw it out. It's sort of the analogy of like throw the baby out with the bathwater, which is a horrific analogy.
Don't do that.
I don't know why. We should look the history of that up. Like, where did that come from? Because it sounds awful. But anyway, it's sort of that analogy. But for people who are in those places, I think most people say, I would almost do anything to not have to feel this. And I can imagine some like weird cartoon where it's like Satan is there and he says, I can help you never feel sad ever again. All it will cost you is any other feeling ever in the rest of your life. Right? And that's exactly what, he's saying we wouldn't want to do. Because then, you wouldn't know what peace feels like. You wouldn't know what love feels like. You wouldn't know what all of those experiences of what we might label healthier passions feel like, or positive, godly passions, constructive passions, etc. And I think it's just such an interesting nuance to sort of push people to think about. Like that, it's not as simple as, I just wish I stopped feeling this way. Even though that's usually where most of us stop. It's like, I just wish I didn't feel this every time this happened to me, that I wish I just only felt this thing, or I wish I didn't feel anything at all. So, that's what Gregory thinks. Now we're going to look at Cyril of Alexandria. He titled this post, Lull Your Passions to Sleep. Such a fun title. Cyril of Alexandria is a good example of a Christian appropriation of the Stoic view of the passions. The goal is not to direct them correctly, but to eliminate them as far as possible. Cyril does not think it is possible to eliminate them completely, which is why he uses the image of lulling them to sleep. Some passions, like the desire for food, simply can't be avoided, but that doesn't stop Cyril from voicing the wish that we wish we didn't have to eat. So I think this is almost like he recognizes how hard this is, or how impossible it is, to say, hey, I'm not even going to use the language of not having anything, but it's like you just need to put them to bed.
Yeah, you can keep them a little bit, but just
Drowsy. You know that state like when Malachi wakes up in the middle of the night and you're like, oh yeah, Becca's got it. I'm just going to go back to sleep. That's how he wants your passions.
Until you get hit.
and then Becca is,
okay, I'm up.
She's Gregory and says, nope, you need to direct those passions in the proper direction.
Go take care of them.
That's right. Like Gregory, Cyril believes that Adam and Eve were created without passion. So this must be like a popular early church fathers view. And I think it bears saying here too that just because they're early church fathers doesn't mean everything they wrote was good, right, and salutary. Just like everything Luther wrote was not perfect, right? They were there, they wrote things, we can listen to them. Anyway, at the fall, the passions rushed in, and that is how the, quote, many were made sinners, he's quoting Romans there. The flesh is now saddled, which is a very interesting choice of words, with natural impulses that drag it down into the muck and mire of sin. And that's like almost language we would use, right? It's saint sinner that we've talked about before. It's the needing to drown our sinful Adam and Eve every day in baptism. So I mean, that's language we literally have in our life as Lutheran Christians. That is not to say that all natural impulses are sinful. Christ experienced hunger and thirst and weariness, for example, which are blameless. But generally speaking, Cyril conceives of the Christian life primarily as a battle against the passions. Mostly, he sees the passions as arising from the body, which is different than Gregory, who classifies anger and desire as arising from the soul. The goal, or you might say the ideal Christian mindset, is an even and unassuming temperament, according to Cyril. Once you have been crucified with Christ, then your passions are lulled to sleep. The Greek fathers often call this state Apatheia, which sounds like
apathy or apathetic.
There you go.
It does not look like that, though. I'm just saying. As soon as you said it, I was like, yeah, I know what that is.
So if you would know, like, the Greek alphabet, and it does look like that. Like Apatheia, basically.
Sure.
Apatheia, yeah. So, meaning a state in which you are no longer subject to passions. Since they saw passions as attacking you from the outside, and in their view the body counts as in some sense outside, it means that you are invincible. Nothing that happens can hurt you. I mean, I just read a book on my shelf over there called Overcoming Apathy. Not just read, I read it a couple of months ago. And the author claimed that in our world, there's not a problem of passion, but a problem of apathy. That we just don't care to do, to be moved, for whatever reason. And so in some ways, like, you could kind of see that.
Yep, absolutely.
Like you could blame being desensitized to things, right? We see everything on the internet, on the TV, and so nothing really moves us anymore. It's just kind of like, oh.
Yep, happened again.
Right. We're not moved to passion or to, like we just talked about, right? Like anger to do something about it. Cyril's interpretation of the New Testament often describes the work of Christ as moving us to the state. For example, this is a very interesting paragraph, by the way, so listen in. For example, Jesus wept in John 11:35. For Cyril, the point of that passage is that Jesus merely wept a little bit and then immediately stopped. How many times have you read that and thought, Jesus shed a token tear and then was like, I'm good?
Yeah, I don't think ever. But it's an interesting perspective.
Yeah, well, so let's keep going. So to modern ears, for whom deep feelings are a virtue, right, which is that's true, this interpretation seems inexplicable, which I would agree with. It is exactly the opposite of what we take the passage to mean. But for Cyril, grief is a tyrant. You can be captured and imprisoned by your grief, which is so true. You ask anybody who's in grief, I mean, that's
yeah, it can be all-consuming, completely.
Right. But Christ came to overthrow that tyrant. So he experienced our grief, but immediately conquered it for us by stopping the tears. Sounds a little bit like what the phrase we might have used, jumping through a few hoops to get there. This is very similar to how he experienced our death, but in 3 days overcame it for us. I don't know. I don't really buy that interpretation personally, but it's not wrong to say that Jesus did all of this so then we could overcome grief, right? So then grief doesn't hold us captive.
Right. Yeah, and it doesn't, he's tying it to experiencing death, 3 days overcome it. And so, I guess you could say, well, he overcame death in 3 days, which is relatively
quicker
quickly.
Than any other person in all of history. Well, not as fast as Lazarus. Lazarus overcame death the first time. Quicker than 3 days, right?
And was it after 4 days?
4 days? Oh, so then it was quicker than Lazarus.
Because in the Jewish tradition, wasn't it 3 days? I think 3 days after 3 days was like they're actually dead.
That's right. That's right.
Or maybe after 2 days, or whatever that length of time was. Yeah.
Anyway, so he and I think it just really, at least the sermons that I preached and that I've heard, it's like Jesus wept, and the word is like a full body, like convulsing,
he grieved.
Right, like he really, this was not a token tear, is how I've always sort of heard it described. And, maybe you could talk about it in both ways. Jesus weeps in that way, so then he can overcome that amount of grief for us too. Therefore, Christ's work enables Christians to make progress towards the goal of being impervious to passions, which again is he chose a very good word here, right? Impervious, like the being able to be things that be absorbed into you, right? So is it impervious wood, or where do you hear that word? Like countertops? You want your countertops
impermeable?
To be... Yeah. Is that what I'm thinking of? So then maybe I have the wrong word.
I think you might have the wrong word.
What's impervious mean then?
Someone tell us. It is after hours and our brains are...
Well, that's what happens when you read articles from the seminary. They use big words.
It's not like I haven't heard the word before.
I'm pretty sure that's what that means, but I think you're right. Impermeable. Yeah, whatever. Someone will think we're now less intelligent than they used to, which is probably good. All right, let's keep going. This differs from Gregory in that Cyril does not seem to think that passions are neutral impulses that can be turned to good or evil, like forging a plowshare and a sword out of the same steel. Nor does Cyril seem to be worried that if you eliminate the evil impulses, you will eliminate the good impulses along with them, like rooting out the tares in a field of wheat. The view that Cyril expresses here is quite common in the early church, especially in the monastic tradition, where the goal of eliminating the passions is paramount. You can read early church people that this went so far as to this is super graphic, but in your marriage relationship, that you were not to have intercourse unless you were trying to have children for this reason, because passion was bad, desire was not good, it was sinful. And so you were only supposed to do that if you were actively trying to have children, supposedly. A very common early church view.
Yeah, I have not heard that.
So, there you go. All right, let's keep going.
All right, next one, Lutheran theology. Kill your passions.
What a title. It should be drown them, right? Come on, that's a gospel. Well, he's going to talk about why, but anyway, sure. Let's go ahead.
All right, my sense is that Lutheran spirituality leans more in the Stoic direction than the Platonist one. We are more comfortable with Cyril than with Gregory, at least when it comes to what we think we should do with our passions. The strange thing is, we don't seem to make this explicit. We just throw out Lutheran phrases and formulations and leave the hearers to infer a spirituality form from that. It is a lack of reflection, just leaving the hearer to infer, that I am trying to correct in this series of blog posts.
Which is a very helpful thing, right? So telling people what you're saying and what it means and what they should do about it and think about it is good. Right? You're laughing, but it's a real thing. You can't just tell people Jesus is Lord. Okay? Maybe that used to be enough for people to know what that meant. Well, it means that he is the one you listen to, right? It means that he is the one you trust in. It's playing out what all of these things mean. So that's all he's saying. I think it's good to highlight that. let's keep going.
It is interesting, though. I just want to talk
Sure.
like where it says, we just throw out Lutheran phrases and formulations and leave the hearers to infer.
Another professor at the seminary would say we over-rely on jargon, assuming everyone knows what it means. So if I say...
Impervious.
I just think that's like basic vocabulary.
Yeah.
So things like
it's
saved by
example.
grace, right?
Yeah.
Like justification, sanctification, like all of these, call them penny words or nickel words, whatever you want to use. Like we just use them, or like even saint and sinner, like that's a phrase we use. If people don't know what that means, it's unhelpful to them.
Was just reading ahead. Okay, this next part is kind of funny. Maybe not funny, but good. What are the phrases and formulations I am thinking of? Maybe we should have kept reading before we started talking about all that.
I knew it was coming.
You did, I didn't. To start, consider something like the law kills and the gospel makes alive.
We said that.
Yep. This is a true statement and is rightly connected with Luther's explanation of baptism in the Small Catechism, that baptism is a daily dying and rising with Christ. This, in turn, is taken from Romans 6. The sinner, we want to say, cannot be reformed, but must be killed. That is because there is nothing good in us that might contribute to our salvation.
All true, right?
Which I think is...
Sounds very Stoic, right? Get rid of your sin. Even Jesus says, be perfect as I am perfect.
He gets up and says, go and
sin no more. Right?
Yeah, we could go down that road. We should go down that road some other time too. Like
what the early Christians did with people who sinned?
Just, Jesus tells us to go and sin no more.
Sure.
And obviously knowing that...
We're going to?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, I like those stories.
Sure.
Okay, all the above is true, but what is not said is what should be inferred from... Okay. But what is not said is what should be inferred from that about the ideal Christian disposition or dispositions. Let's say, for example, that a pastor preaches a sermon which emphatically condemns the hearers from their sins. Presumably, the preacher is not hoping that the people will go home and be so paralyzed by self-loathing that they cannot leave the house. That would be the wrong inference to draw from the law.
Right. That you don't... The goal is never to just make you feel so bad. Like, this is not a... I'm sure it happens, but...
Well, we know that it has happened in the church history, though.
Right.
I mean, part of the reason that Luther went into the depths of the studies is that he did is because he had such a self-loathing view on him because of his sin.
Right. Guilt, shame, etc.
Yep.
Yeah.
Tormented by his sin. Okay. More likely, the preacher intends the people to abandon any hope of salvation other than Christ, so that when the gospel is preached, they trust only in Jesus for salvation. This makes a lot of sense if the question you are addressing is salvation. However, if the question is one of spirituality, what disposition... Let me restart that. However, if the question is one of spirituality, what disposition the Christian should be aiming for, then it leans heavily in the Stoic direction. As I have described the law/gospel dynamic above, one is left with the clear impression that passions are inherently sinful and need to be killed. Unlike Gregory, we don't think the passions are capable of being directed toward good as well as evil, like forging both as plowshare and a sword out of the same steel. We don't need to be concerned about rooting out the wheat along with the tares. We have nothing but tares, and Christ has killed them all. So we should aspire to a life undisturbed by passions such as anger or desire. Interesting, though. I mean, you saw our action.
Sure, yeah. He nodding his head in agreement, or a...
It's like, yeah, I mean...
It makes sense? You follow the argument?
Absolutely, because, again, if we're going back to the... Like, we have nothing good in us that might contribute to our salvation, which is true.
Mm-hmm.
We have nothing but tares.
But he's talking about disposition now, which
Right.
is different. Right? Like the disposition of a Christian, which usually we would talk about in the post-justification, so post having been saved, right? So in your saved state as a follower of Jesus, how shall you live?
Well, and I like this next part, though, right? So we have nothing but tares. And then it says, Christ has killed them all.
Sure.
And so then, again, I go back to I think we've talked about this before. We've talked about it before in other instances, like with the preparing your field, right? Well, Christ is preparing the field so that the wheat may rise.
He prepared your field by taking Roundup to it and just spraying it everywhere. Well, I just think it's even interesting. That's like probably a really bad joke, but anyway, it's an interesting language to write that Christ has killed them all, because I don't think most of us think about it in the sense of like, Christ is killing me in my baptism, right? I think most of us would focus on the latter part of that, which we would say, Christ is raising me to new life, but in order to be raised to new life, you must first be killed.
Well, and it's like the whole reborn thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah. You're totally right. Like, this is it makes sense. And I even think, like, depends on what, I mean, obviously this is a duh statement, but depends on what your context was being raised, right? So different, if you were not raised a Lutheran, there are certain denominations and certain branches of Christianity that are hard into this. Like, you think about things like the temperance movement in general, right? So no drinking, there are churches and there's no dancing, go so far as like clothing that people are allowed or not allowed to wear, right? And so outside of Lutheranism, I think especially, people would say, yeah, like, isn't that the goal?
Right.
And so for us, it might be like yeah, we can consider it as truth, but for a lot of people, I think they might hear this and say, yes, this is the goal of a follower of Jesus. Full stop. Maybe not that hard, but period. Not an exclamation point.
Well, you can say full stop. All right. Now, there may be some Lutherans who would say amen to that. However, I don't think those are the right inferences to draw from the law/gospel distinction. In the next post, I will discuss why.
That's why we had to read all 5, because with a sentence like that, we can't just stop at 4. Well, have a good week, everybody. We'll see you next week.
We just can't full stop. We got to keep going.
Which is fun. So you know
it's
where that
joke, by the way.
Do you know where that comes from?
What, the full stop?
It's Morse code.
Yeah.
Right? Whatever, and then a stop, right? And so full stop is like I'm done transmitting, nothing else to say, over.
Well, and the whole thing, you said it earlier too, period. Why do we say that?
Same thing.
It's the end of the sentence.
Yeah, that's right. Which
not go on.
Punctuation was like one of my worst things as like grammar. I have no idea.
Just
Don't
put
ask me
exclamation points on everything.
Like, when do you use a comma versus semicolon versus like all of those things?
So see, I still think about this. Anytime I write anything, my English teacher, history or high school English
You're about
teacher,
to solve my problem?
Yeah. So I remember somebody in the class asked a question, when do we know to use a comma? And his phrase said, if you have to ask yourself if you should use a comma, don't put one.
What?
Yeah. He's like, and his point was, if you have to ask yourself if there's a pause there or not, there probably isn't a pause.
All right.
So don't use a comma. Now, of course, there's other rules and things, like if you're making a list of things.
Yeah. It's just like my wood shop teacher in high school always used to say, you can trust your eye. And so whenever I go around, whenever I go around hanging pictures in our house, when my dad and my brother are there, the engineers, they want to pull out a tape measure and a level.
That's how I am too.
And I'm like, no, just trust your eye, like, put it up there. And it generally works out. Like, your eye is pretty good. So like I hung pictures in our living room recently, and you just eyed it in the middle, like, does this look like the middle to you? It looks like the middle to me. Put it in, put it, the next one, we're going for 3 in a row. Put the next one up. Said, okay, is that about the middle? Looks lined up to me, like about the right spacing? Sure. Put a nail in the wall.
Now I'm going to go to your house and be like.
And then, but then, here, I'll finish on a good, right? Then I got the tape measure out because I didn't want to have to eye the spacing between the two with the nail. You can't really quite put the nail in just the right spot. So I got the tape measure out and measured between. So I'm not totally trust your eye.
See, I get the level out. I get the tape measure. Becca's always like, "Can you hang this?"
How much do I have an hour and a half to hang this singular picture? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm very particular with that stuff.
Well, does this drive you nuts then?
No, because that's the purpose of it.
It's disordered.
Correct. Right. So I understand the purpose of that. Yeah.
Although, if you look, there's some like general spacing. Like I hung this one and said, this is too close. Because everything else is about like maybe 2 or 3 inches. Anyway, that's not what we're here talking about. So, last article, Lutheran theology, direct the passions. I said in the last post that I didn't think a Stoic spirituality was the correct inference to draw from the law-gospel distinction. I'd be very curious what his other phrases were that he thinks are kind of unhelpful too, but whatever, we don't have that. I have 2 examples to support my statement. Luther himself and Article 1 of the Formula of Concord. Hey, which last week we talked about the Book of Concord, and so the Formula of Concord is that very thing. So, hey, look at that. Unintentional tie-in from last week. If you made it this far, you've got it. If you read any of Luther's writings at all, you don't get the impression that he is trying to rid himself of passions. He can give full voice to the Christian experience of suffering, as he does, for example, in his exegesis of Jacob wrestling with God in his Genesis commentary. There he says that sometimes God withholds good from his children the way a heavenly father would play with his son by pretending to withhold an apple. What an image. From God's perspective, it is play. But from our perspective, he is putting us through hell. Indeed, tentatio, struggle, is a key factor that makes someone a theologian, according to Luther. So obviously, Luther thinks that there is a constructive use for negative emotions.
And when I think of Luther, I don't think of somebody who is emotionless.
Yeah, that's why his writing is so funny, when he curses at people and calls them fat pigs and all sort of things.
Even in the whole like Reformation period, right, when he's going before the council, the wasn't the king at the time, was it?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Like the Diet of Worms. Diet of Worms.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
Here I stand, I can do no more.
Yes. Like he's clearly upset.
You sure he didn't just say, "Here I stand, I can do no more"?
I mean, who knows how he said it, right? But I mean,
it's not how I like to imagine him
all the
saying
reports and like accounts of it. Like he was deeply distressed about having to do it, obviously, but he knew he had to. And when you're talking about deep distress, it's a emotion. When you think about him, like self-loathing and locking himself away and like literally like what he would describe as fighting his demons, right?
Yeah, I mean, most people think Luther struggled with depression, is
right?
what we would call it nowadays.
So I would, when I think about Luther, I don't think of somebody who's emotionless at all. I think it's somebody who has leaned into his emotions for that very reason, for constructive use of those negative emotions. I think, though, that would have to be something that he had learned over time for sure.
Oh,
but
of course.
Yeah, but let's...
Well, I mean, I think even just like the idea of this image of God's play, right? Because even with a child, like it's fun right away, like this keep away game. But if you play too long, now it becomes like torture, right? And it's very, the change happens really fast too. Like everything is fun and games, and then all of a sudden it's not, right? Like it's very much a, why are you doing this sort of language? And so, the language of tentatio, we talked about it in our meditation episode, that this is what makes a theologian, someone that you experience hard things. And, Luther, another Lutheran guy, the first president of our church
CFW?
body. Yes, old CFW. I've never heard that before.
I just said...
Gotcha. I like that. So, old CFW, woo! He said, I think it was him, who said theology is best learned in the school of experience. I think that's who said that. And so it's to actually learn about what God is, who he is, which is just a theologian is someone who talks about God or who knows who God is. You have to actually live life. All right. You get the same impression when you look at Luther's hymns, and I don't just mean the words, but the melodies too. A Mighty Fortress is not a hymn that is holding up freedom from passion as the Christian ideal. Dear Christians, one and all rejoice is not quiet and peaceful either. If I had to pick one word to describe the tenor of Luther's melodies, it would be bold. Dr. Maxwell is also a fantastic organist. So he speaks from musical experience.
I mean, those are two good ones on an organ.
Right. Oh, yeah. That fits his theology because he sees faith as a bold confidence in the promises of Christ, which, I mean, we've talked about together, at least I don't know if it's here. I love the power of like Lenten music, right?
You talked about it.
Incite passion in a sort of, wow, this is a hard season. It's why I love Easter Sunday too, because we get to have the passionate songs and hymns of resurrection. It's all there. The Formula of Concord in its own way reinforces this message. Article 1 says that original sin is an accident, not a substance. This is like a very philosophical thing here. An accident, not a substance. A substance in Aristotelian philosophy defines what a thing is. I'll read that one more time. A substance in Aristotelian philosophy. So how you say that? That doesn't sound right. Defines what a thing. Aristotle, his philosophy.
There you go.
Defines what a thing is. You can't change the substance without changing the thing. If you burn a chair to ashes, for example, you have changed its substance. It is no longer a chair. An accident is a characteristic of a thing which you could change without changing what that thing is. If you paint a chair, for example, you have changed an accident, but not its substance. It is still a chair. And so let's rewind before we
Article I had to go back through and read.
Yeah, says that original sin is an accident, not a substance. So he's going to talk about what this means. But original sin, not an accident, not a substance, but an accident. So here's what that means. To say that original sin is an accident is to say that human nature cannot simply be defined as sin. It doesn't show the whole picture. We need to make a distinction between our nature and the corruption it undergoes because of sin. That corruption is indeed very deep, as Article 1 emphasizes. That's why we need Jesus. But the distinction between human nature and sin must be maintained. And so this is like, you could get into all sorts of things here too. But this is the base core of like the Gnostics, right? Which would basically say all matter is bad, right? Because it's tainted with sin, it means all of its substance has changed and now is bad, undesirable, not to be sought after, all of those sort of things. And we would say, well, no, because all people are made in the image of God, that yes, they have a thing that needs help, but it doesn't remove their divinely created beingness and include it in the world too, right? That the world itself, even though, yes, is fallen in sin, is still waiting the redemption of God and things like that. If we apply that same distinction to our sinful passions, then we would have to say that our passions are indeed corrupt, but they are not identical with sin. They are impulses that could have a good purpose, but that sin has corrupted. This is a lot closer to Gregory's view of the passions than to Cyril's. The passions are the steel out of which you could forge a sword or a plowshare. If you root out the tares, you are in danger of destroying the wheat as well. In the end, I would suggest that if Lutherans have an ideal disposition, it is confidence. In my view, Gregory's description of the passions is closer to that ideal than Cyril's, and it better describes what Luther was up to in his life and his hymnody. What do you think Lutherans ought to do with our passions, particularly anger and desire? And that's it. So what do you think? I feel like he's trying to make the case, basically, that they're not all bad, or they're not to be rooted out entirely.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it changes the mind frame of kind of that, right? That it just as far as like going back to what Luther was saying, put the negative things for constructive, right? So it was very interesting, and I'm trying to like tie in Gregory and all of this from reading it too and following it, and like versus the Stoic mindset, right? I mean, for me, I don't know if it was like earth shattering or not, because I'm very much so. Well, you handed this to me, and what did I say right away?
I don't have anger. I don't feel angry. I don't get angry often.
I was like, I don't know if I have a whole lot to add to this one.
Yeah, this has not been a subtle way for me to tell you you're angry. That's not what this is.
It's my secret, right? I'm always angry. Culture reference?
No. Is that the Incredible Hulk?
There you go.
I mean, I would never know that, but just a lucky guess.
But I would say this is kind of how I have always viewed it. It goes with anything. It's how you, whatever you are experiencing, whatever you are feeling, whatever you are doing or want to do, or right, it's what is your intent behind it.
Sure.
And how are you managing that, I guess, is the best way that I see it. Because I don't see, nor have I ever really seen anger as an issue. It's what do you do in your anger that is the issue.
Right.
I would say desire and passion are good, but are not necessarily evil, right? But it's what are you doing with those things? And I think as long as the intent, or you're doing it for the right reasons, I don't know how to phrase this better way. But if you're doing it with the right intentions and in a Christian loving way, I don't think they're outright bad.
Sure. I think it somewhat speaks to some of the like current cultural things too. So, whether it's anxiety, right? It's we want to rid ourselves of anxiety because we don't want to feel that. Whether it's the grief too, and a lot of the contemporary things I feel like that I see are you need to learn how to change your thinking, right? Like change your engagement with said thing. And in some ways, like, that's good, but I feel like this is it gives a different frame of reference to do a similar thing with, right? So it's not hey, you need to never be angry again. That's not realistic, right? You need to never be sad again. Okay. You need to never feel grief, whatever it is. Like, you can't do that.
Right.
But it's to say, hey, we know we live in this world that is sinful and broken, and so our passions are corrupt. Right? They are not wholeheartedly pure,
right,
or honorable, all those sort of things. But it's not to say we should spend our time trying to root them out, and instead should spend our time trying to redirect them positively. Right? So you think about habits and things that you want to change. Usually they tell you if you're going to try and change something, you need to start something in its place. Right? So they'll never tell an addict, go home and sit and think about drinking all day long. It won't work.
Replace it with something else.
Yeah, you need to replace it with something else. And so, it gives you more language for, hey, well, I can talk about that, and that's probably good, but I can say, hey, I'm going to take this passion, recognize and say that it might be directed or could be directed towards sin, but that I have the Spirit of God within me, and so I'm going to take that and funnel it into something else that, we talk about language of loving my neighbor, serving those around me, focusing on the vocations that God has given me, that it's a helpful thing. Because I think a lot of people deal with anger.
Oh, absolutely.
Maybe you're immune to those sort of things. But
and I don't know. I guess I've just never really been an angry person. But I would say the passion and desire to do certain things, right? Like, I've always been a motivated person, but like self-motivated. So like your story of of the voucher or whatever to pay the fee back. So I don't know that I have any instances in my childhood of anything like that. It's always like, I'm going to do this because I want to go do that.
Right.
But on the flip side, sometimes it's hard to get myself motivated to do things.
Sure.
So I can see where the anger and the passion and what motivates or drives people to things absolutely is in play. And I would agree that oftentimes if we are angry, that our anger is not directed in a good way. And so I think it's very helpful to look at it and say, well, no, anger is not a bad thing unless, right? It's how we deal with it.
Yeah, it's what you do. It's what you do with it. And I think it's if you struggle with what you would call negative things, your goal is not to try and rid yourself of them, because to rid yourself of them completely would mean you become non-human, or you're with the Lord, but instead to try and figure out how to respond to them, right? And in many ways, that's, I think, what he's trying to point us to.
There's a lot of cool things in here, a lot of cool imagery that I like, things that I haven't thought about before. Adam and Eve in the garden, not having passion.
Not having passion.
The wheat and the tares, that, again, I'll go back to that we are all tares and Christ has killed them all. I like that imagery. A lot of things that we could talk about, a lot of imagery, metaphor, things that we could talk about with that. But no, I liked it.
It was good. All right. We'll see you next week.